Comic stores are dying. This is something I keep hearing all the time, to the point where I just kind of bought into it. But the more I go to stores and the more I check it out and everything, I begin to wonder if that's true, and I wonder if the people making these claims, if they've ever been in a comic shop, because I'm going to the comic shops and I'm just not seeing it. Greetings everyone, welcome to the underground lair where we bring our creations to life. I'm Scott with Serkworks Art Labs. I'm a professional illustrator, designer, and mad creator, because you know what? You have to be a little crazy to do this thing called art. And on the topic of crazy, one thing that can get a little nuts is Free Comic Book Day. If you've ever been to a Free Comic Book Day event, you'll know it is usually pretty huge. It's kind of like Black Friday for comic stores. So, and you know, it's always been like that in the past. Usually always the busiest day of the year for a comic book store. But, you know, we haven't had a traditional Free Comic Book Day in a little while. In 2020, they opted to do a free comic summer, I think, and slowly phase out some of the free books because, you know, to allow for social distancing and everything. This year, it was pushed back from its usual date in May to August, and we've just had that. So how was it? Are people ready to get back, show up in person, and support the local comic book shop? Is this the shot in the arm the comic book industry needs, or is this sort of the beginning of the end for your local comic book shop? Well, I did attend a Free Comic Book Day celebration, so I'm going to tell you my experience, give you my 2 cents, and while I do that, I'm going to show you some artwork that I did for one of these events, some cover remarks. So I'm going to put that up on the screen and let's get talking about it. So I keep hearing all these different predictions about the state of the comic book industry. There's a podcast that I listen to, and pretty much every week they're spelling gloom and doom for comic shops and floppy comics, saying, you know, it's like they're always like, oh, I give it 2 years tops and then it's over. But yeah, I think they've been saying that for at least 2 years now. And, you know, and I started to believe all this stuff, and you know, maybe there's some truth to that in certain respects, but based on what I'm seeing going to comic book stores, going to events, and just talking with comic book store owners, I'm not sure that information is completely accurate. I don't know if the people saying this are really on the ground or and are actually going to comic stores and seeing the kind of things that I'm seeing when they hold these events, or just on the average day, like I said, just getting out there and talking with comic book store owners, seeing how they're doing, what kind of things they're selling. It makes me think that there may not be as much truth to this as I previously thought based on all the information that I was getting. Now, of course, my experience may not be indicative of every single comic shop. I don't go to every single comic shop. I only go to a few in my area, one in particular, but talking with my local comic book store owner who talks to a network of other comic store owners and just getting feedback from him about where they feel the industry is going and what they're doing to strive and be successful gives me a lot of hope for the future of comic book stores. But I was listening to all these naysayers and just people predicting the end of comic stores, and you know, when the pandemic hit in 2020, and there was a period where they were closed, I was really worried for my local comic store because that's all I ever heard. And when they did eventually go back in, and when people were allowed to go back in the stores, I went in and I kind of asked how they were doing, and this is a little bit after that, and they were saying how they were doing really well. It turns out when people are stuck at home, one of the things they like to do is read, and one of the things they read is comics. So many comic stores, from what I'm hearing from my local comic store owner who's speaking to other store owners, is that they were actually doing better during the pandemic, or at least they hadn't slowed down, which really gave me some hope for the comic book stores, because just based on what I was hearing. So yeah, knowing that the comic book stores in my area were experiencing similar results as my local comic book shop. And don't get me wrong, there are comic shops that have been closing, and there aren't as many shops as there used to be. But in my world, where I live, I think one comic book store has closed in the past, and we've got quite a few. I think one has closed in the past year or so, but that wasn't based on any kind of sales. It was just the owners retiring and decided that they wanted to hang up shop. And this was, and when they went out with a bang, and you know, it was just one of those things. But other than that, there's actually been stores opening. The comic shop shop I go to, my local comic book shop, they're a relatively new store. And even since they've opened, I've noticed a lot of other comic shops, or comic adjacent, I guess you would say, pop culture themed, like anime or manga stores, or just pop culture or gaming stores, which typically you would think these stores would be in the same kind of position as a comic store. And from the people that I've talked to that are going to these stores, they're usually pretty busy. That sounds like a pretty good sign to me. But I still think there's quite a bit of interest in comic books and pop culture, things that go around with comics, with the, you know, obviously with the movies and all of that. And I always thought, well, if they would just, you know, if they would advertise in the movies and direct people to comic stores and let people know this is where this stuff comes from, comic stores. And I still think that's a great idea, but I think people are still finding comic stores with these events like Free Comic Book Day. A lot of people that wouldn't, there's people out there that don't even know that comic books still are around. And with the, you know, the advertising that's been done, getting people into comic book stores, and people showing up who did not know, are just excited about comics. And a lot of the people coming in are people that typically, I think a comic store, it's older guys that are just hanging on. I mean, this is the stuff that I'm being fed, and I don't think it's true. I mean, when I was there at this event, there were a lot of younger kids interested in comics and just excited. It was amazing. But just going back to my point, comic stores, at least in my area, seem to be doing pretty well. And I hear of other comic stores closing, and yes, stores are going to close down. But, you know, some restaurants close down too, but it doesn't mean that people don't want to eat anymore. Comic shops are like any other business. It takes a business savvy person to run them. And I think, at least in my area, I must have some pretty good people behind the counters and running the shops that know what they're doing and that are keeping these businesses going and profiting. Now, with any business, times change and you have to adapt to those changes. If you are still running a comic store like you did 20 years ago, then maybe you are struggling. You know, with alternatives out there, you know, like Amazon, it really is hard to compete on price alone, but there are things comic stores can do that Amazon just can't. You know, creating an experience. People will go to comic stores for the experience and have knowledgeable people that know what they're talking about. You know, they're doing special offers, store signings, getting artists in there, just creating these experiences, bringing in celebrities, doing store exclusive items that you can only get there that you can't get on like Amazon. These are the things that are drawing people in and people are really interested in, and just like I said, creating an experience that you can't get just from online. But there are a lot of other items, toys and collectibles, jewelry, you know, all centered around pop culture, all that makes sense with the comic book genre. And that isn't to say that comic books aren't selling. The bulk of, I'm sure, what my comic book store is selling are comics, and that goes for floppies as well, because I also hear how, oh, it's the end of floppies. Floppies are gonna go the way of the dodo. They're not gonna be any more floppies, and it's all gonna go to trades. And yes, some people are going to trades, but trades aren't really collectibles. People, you know, I think people buy trades to read them and get caught up in everything, but as far as collectability, people are buying floppies and offering, you know, things like I said, store exclusives, these variant covers that are exclusive only to one stores. I've talked about these before. I've done some of them. Those are things you're not going to be able to get on Amazon, and those are the things that are drawing people in. And I was just amazed by the amount of people that just eat this stuff up, just talking to the people and seeing what people are bringing through, what people are buying, and the covers that I've already done, and how many people have already purchased those and purchased them with sketches attached to them, the remark covers, all of that. These are things that, you know, a savvy comic book store owner is going to offer and promote and be able to bring people in, because there is a market for this kind of thing. So I don't know if floppies are going to go away, especially not from independent comic book artists. I mean, yes, maybe Marvel and DC may see that the trades are more profitable. I don't know, but at the cover prices, and that's a whole other thing. But I think having a variety, because there are people that are going to want to buy floppy comics, and for that collectability, that first issue, a first issue collectible of a comic that does well or is in low print run or whatever, People want that. You don't get that really with the trade. Even if you go straight to trade, I don't know that you're going to have that same collectability to that. And if Marvel or DC ever decide to go that way, I don't know. I'm not sure, but I know I don't see a world where floppies are going to go away, even for, you know, the nostalgia factor. Think about records. I mean, if Marvel or DC stop putting out floppy comics, and I don't have any inside information that's going to happen, but again, people are talking about this, but they're talking about a lot of stuff that doesn't seem to jive with what I'm seeing. But records, I mean, people are downloading, even before that, you know, back with CDs and everything, a lot of people stopped buying records, but there are still those hardcore fans that love vinyl and love that collectability of vinyl. And because of that, even though many record stores are gone, there's still a lot that are just doing really well because they've niched down and they've catered to that specific customer. You know, tapping into the enthusiasts and the hardcore fans, and a lot of times those are the people that have quite a bit of money to spend, and they do spend quite a bit of money. And I'm not saying only focus on hardcore fans, because my local comic book store is a great example. Their store is very bright, very inviting. It's not like the old days where it was a dungeon, where it's just a bunch of guys, sweaty guys hanging out. It's very open to family, to women, to everyone. And that's something that's another reason why I think comics are growing, because back in the days it was a very small subset of people that collected comics, and I think it's kind of opened up the people that are interested in comics just coming from manga and just the explosion of females that are into comics now, just being open and inviting to people who may not typically collect comics. If you can walk into a store and feel comfortable, like my girlfriend came to Free Comic Book Day, that was the first time she ever came, and she loved it. She bought a bunch of comics and everything, and she was just excited about it. So I mean, you're able to convert people that maybe have this negative view of comics, what it's all about. When they go there, when they talk to, you know, helpful, pleasant people at the store who just aren't like the comic book guy that are gonna shoo you away if you don't know what issue, you know, Daredevil first appeared in or whatever. It's not like that. I mean, it's, at least my local comic store isn't like that. And maybe there are some shops that are still out there, and maybe they do well because they're that type of thing, and maybe there are certain people that are into that. But there's so many different ways you can approach your comic store. But I think the way my local comic book store does, I'm really, like I said, I'm a fan. Anytime I can see kids getting into comics, coming into the store and being fascinated about that, because you hear, oh, but they just want to play video games. But there's a lot of comic books based on video games that people want to get a little more into the story, and I see that, and it's a good gateway to get kids into comics, and I see that happening. Now, back to what I was talking about this being the end, you know, near the end days of comic book stores and everything. And one of the things that tells me that I don't know if this is true is because not only is my comic store doing well, they just expanded to a larger location. They moved to a couple suites over to a bigger location, twice as big. They just sort of had I guess I would say a soft reopening. I think they're probably going to do another grand reopening. But, you know, they just opened just prior to Free Comic Book Day, so they had a lot more space. And so you may be asking, well, how did it go? How did Free Comic Book Day go? Well, let me tell you, my local comic book store set up this great event like they usually do on Free Comic Book Day, but now they've got a lot more space, a lot more product. So when I showed up early in the morning, Free Comic Book Day, before the store was even open, there was a line lined up around, you know, people lining up to get in. So I went in and got set up. I was there signing with 3 other artists. We've got all our stuff set up and everything. And as soon as those doors opened, man, you know, people were in there. Of course, they're wanting to check out the free comics first. They want to get there early to get the free comics, check out the selection and everything. But it's not like, most people when they go to Free Comic Book Day, it's not like they're getting the comics and they're getting out of there. They're going in, they're purchasing stuff. Even I remember a couple years back, I went to like 5 or 6 different stores in my, you know, where I live. And I wasn't just, even though I was going to those different stores, I wanted to support all of them. So not only am I getting some free comics at each store, and I'm also checking out what they got and buying things as well. So, and people at the table, I mean, you know, early in the morning, first thing, the remarks that you're seeing me drawing I mean, I sold 2 of them like right off the bat, and I wasn't sure how those would sell because I've done remarks on like the Archie books that I did the variant cover for, and I've got another one coming up for Ice Cream Man for Image Comics, and I've already have pre-orders for more remarks, which are just the sketches that you actually draw on the cover. So, and I kind of do a little elaborate. They can go from anything from just a quick sketch to something a little more elaborate. But yeah, I sold 2 of them right off the bat, and of the 4 that I did, I should have done more. Of the 4 that I did, I sold 3 that day, and I'm sure if I had more, I could have sold more. So, you know, something to think about. But these are those type of things that up until a few, you know, a month or 2 ago, I didn't really know what remarks were, but people are eating these up. I mean, I had people coming up and say, "Oh yeah, I got your cover," and I was talking about the remarks, and like, "Yeah, well, no, I got the one with I got the remarks, and I pre-ordered another one." So people are loving these, and that's just one thing. I mean, the sketch covers are a whole nother, but these are great for artists going in there, and you know, I did really well for a show. I think as far as a comic book, just an appearance like that at a local comic store, I think the best, probably the best I've ever done. And I usually do pretty well at those comic stores. I mean, I've even opted to stop doing comic conventions in lieu of just these store signings because it's a quick thing, it's a one-day thing, there's not a lot of planning and everything, and you know, I just go in and I get to talk to people, I get that comic book fix, I mean that interacting with people fix around, you know, comics and that interaction. So I love that. I love meeting with fans and people that are into comics just like me and talking about it. It's just great. And even though my local comic store opened up in this larger location, it was busy. It was pretty much busy all day until the very end. After, you know, most people want to get there kind of early so they, like I said, they can get their comics. It started to trickle down towards the end, but before that, man, it was hopping. There were people all over, people lined up at the register, people lined up at the artist tables, and myself and the 3 other artists, I couldn't see at one point where they weren't working or taking a commission or doing something. So all of us, I think, doing really well. And as far as the store itself, they said they had their best free comic book day ever, their best sales day ever. So that's great. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, how can all this information about, you know, comic stores are dying and all this stuff, how can that be the case when at least in my world, they're doing better than ever, even after, you know, the year and a half or whatever that we've already had. So I don't see this slowing down, but I think a good store has to adapt and have to see what people are into. And like I said, as far as what people are into, there was a variety of different things, and it wasn't just Marvel or DC, and even with the free comic book day selection, there were so many. There were some biographies. There were, you know, kids comics. You know, there was like Red Room Ed Piskor, which is very violent. You know, very adult natured. Everything from like, you know, Smurfs to, I mean, there's so many, and that's what I like to see. I mean, I have my particular thing that I for more or less that I like for comics, and a lot of people do. But don't deny other people what they're into. There are comics for everyone, and just to see the difference, you know, just talking to people what other people were into and what they're buying and everything, and knowing that there's an option for just about anyone that loves to read comics. Because I'm not one of those people that is like, oh no, we gotta keep the comics to this core group of people. Comics should be for everyone, and there are comics for everyone. So anyway, why try to deter people from collecting comics? It's kind of like the music snob thing, like, oh, I heard that band before they were a thing or whatever. You know, why would you want to alienate people from the thing you love? Other people should be able to experience that in their own way. And it may not be the same kind of titles or whatever, but to have a variety of different things. And that's what I saw, man. I just saw so many, I mean, and the 3 other artists that I exhibited with do very different stuff. Eric Henson that I exhibited with, his stuff is very much something that you would find in a Marvel or DC title, that kind of style. Very, you know, awesome work. Just the stuff that's up that, you know, at that par with those artists at Marvel and DC. My stuff is, you know, it's a little more independent. I'm doing my own thing. Different people, another person that I set by, Albert, his stuff was, a lot of stuff was a little more chibi oriented. So another artist was it's much more adult. So it just depends. I mean, very different, these three artists, and because of that, there were, like I said, it wasn't like everyone was gravitating to one particular artist. We all have our own thing. They're all one thing that we're good at, or we're interested in, and because of that, we all did pretty well, and so did the store. And you know, it warms my heart to see that, and to see so many people, so many new people interested in comics. People just finding out about comics. You know, kids. You know, some kids just and. In addition to, you know, the remarks and everything that I was selling, I was doing good with some, you know, some other stuff. My comic book workbooks that you've heard me talk about on the show. You know, the thumbnail workbooks and the pre-paneled workbooks, all that stuff. The lettering workbooks, those were doing really well, to the point where I think the comic store owner took notice of that, and he's like, "Yeah, we should definitely carry these." So I'm gonna be carrying my books through the local comic book store, and you know, maybe I should look into other stores and see if they want to do the same. But yeah, so that's another opportunity for me that I had a feeling they'd do all right, but yeah, they were doing pretty well. And of course, you know, Young and the Dead, it sells the minute I talk to people about it. You know, when I give my pitch, I mean, people are like, "Oh, that sounds pretty cool." So, and the remarks, even on my own books, they were selling pretty well as well. And as comic book artists, we need to recognize, you know, some of these things that the comic stores are doing that are successful for them. Like I said, I didn't know about remarks much about them. I've heard of them, but you know, I heard mostly about people doing them on trading cards, but not so much comics. And you know, it's a thing. And why not shift into doing some of those? Because you know, that's what people want. So give the people what they want. And so pay attention to that as artists, you know, and reach out to your local comic book store owner, because when they have these events, what they want to bring people into the store, and depending on where your level is, I mean, you don't have to be this. I mean, I'm not this huge, well-known name. I don't think any of the artists are huge, like people that, like, typically you would say, you know, like household names or anything like that. But you don't have to be. I mean, you can just be a good artist. You don't have to be anyone that people have heard of or have this massive following. And even if you're just starting out in your artistic journey, if you're all right, maybe you're not the best, it really doesn't matter, because the people coming to the stores, I mean, they're looking, I mean, you hear it time and time again, as like, what, oh wait, you drew this? You made this? And people are just in awe of this. And I mean, even if you're, like I said, if you're just getting started, your work's okay, it's a lot better than a lot of people. I mean, you hear that comment all the time. I can't even draw stick figures. This is amazing. And so reach out to your local comic store. If they're having an event, see if they can set you up and you know, and help them out and promote it. See if you can get some friends to offer to, you know, I can bring some people in, I've got friends, whatever you can do, you know, make it worth their while, make this win-win situation. But yeah, that's what we need to do. And yeah, just remember, wherever you are in your artistic journey, you know, don't be afraid to reach out. Get in the comic store, and if anything, get your feet wet, just seeing what happens. Get a feel for that, improve your skills and everything, because yeah, I mean, people will be blown away. So anyway, I had a fantastic time at Free Comic Book Day this year, 2021. I'm looking forward to Free Comic Book Day 2022, because I really honestly think it's just gonna get bigger, and at least that's where it's trending based on what I'm seeing. But I don't know, what are you guys seeing? Are you guys seeing the same thing that I'm seeing? Are you seeing something else? Are you listening to the other people that are saying it's the end of comic book stores? I don't know, but I feel positive. I'm looking forward to it, and I've got other events along the way. Maybe not anything as big as Free Comic Book Day for another year or so, but I've got the cover for Ice Cream Man, the variant cover that I did for Ice Cream Man number 25 coming out. I'm sure I'll be doing a store signing for that. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm just looking forward to hopefully, you know, proving some of these naysayers wrong and just keep comics going, because I love comics, and anytime I can get other people into it or see other people get into it, it just, it brightens my day. So anyway, that's all I got to say today. I'll talk to you guys later. That is all.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Also, you can follow me at Serkworks on social media. And now you can support the work that I do on Patreon. If you like making comics, then go to Serkworks.com and pick up the Comic Maker Starter Kit. It's packed full of fonts, brushes, templates, and more. And best of all, it's totally free.